I was very skeptical about whether I would enjoy Hard Knocks offseason New York Giants because I thought offseason the most boring time of year. No, this is actually the best version of Hard Knocks because you're actually getting a lot of really inside the scenes dialogue about players who actually matter. You know how it is with Hard Knocks during the during training camp. You get a few little glimpses of the star players, and then they make you fall in love with the Charles James II or something like that. And I love Charles James II, mostly because of Hard Knocks, but it's not necessarily like the really juicy stuff. Whereas with this Hard Knocks, I mean, you're seeing Brian Daboll, you're seeing the Saquon Barkley stuff, you're seeing a lot of Malik Nabers who they eventually draft, and it's really, really good. Look, for those of you who are brought here by the algorithm, I'm Seth Payne, played for the Houston Texans, so I do this from a Houston Texans perspective. But I think you'll like some of the things that I've deduced from Hard Knocks so far. One is that I'm growing increasingly more impressed by the way that Joe Shane, the GM of the Giants, is handled the Saquon Barkley situation, which was basically an unwinnable situation anyway. And then Brian Daboll, against my better expectations, judgment, and wishes, he's starting to really grow on me. But there's some alarming similarities to one William O'Brien that I don't think you want to necessarily ignore. And it starts off right off the bat, like in the first couple minutes of this episode. Just Texans fans, just brace yourself for a second when you see this slogan.
It's an evaluation.
Okay, smart, tough, dependable. Right there to the left. Smart, tough, dependable. That was the slogan back in 2020 when Bill O'Brien and Jack Easterby decided to just go completely off the reservation and trade everybody for nothing, pay nobodies for way too much something, and it was just a mess. And smart, tough, dependable was one of the slogans that, just like Brian Daboll, Bill O'Brien brought with him from the New England Patriots. There's nothing wrong with the slogan itself. Yeah, I would love to have players that are smart, tough, and dependable. I think the problem was when Bill O'Brien and Jack Easterby were running the show, they like mistook book smarts for football smarts. They mistook tough for, hey, if an offensive lineman gets his ass beat, at least he punches the defensive lineman in his kidneys as he runs past the offensive lineman and sacks your quarterback. Dependable was like dependably overpaying guys who would be out of the league within a year or two. So smart, tough, dependable sounds like the slogan for a new truck. It also looks a lot like STD. And Hard Knocks is worth the watch. You probably came in just after I recommended this season. I like this off-season Hard Knocks a lot better than the regular season Hard Knocks. As far as how this episode relates to the Texans, there are a couple things. For one, let's slide here. Sorry, Lev Shriver. For one, Brian Daboll he's an offensive-minded coach with experience in New England as well as many other places, but also Alabama, just like Bill O'Brien after he left the Texans. But man, he's temperamental and he's fiery. Sometimes his temper gets the better of him. He's working on that now. For one, after Wink Martindale, the defensive coordinator, just RUNNOFT in the middle of the night because he apparently couldn't stand any Daboll anymore. I don't know what the hell happened there. But he's likable in these settings. Like I said on the thumbnail, max football guy mode. He's in max football mode all the time. And I kind of respect that. But it comes into play with the conversation with Malik Nabers. The Malik Nabers stuff is really interesting because I think some of the reservations about Malik Nabers, you could draw a parallel to Stephon Diggs or various other receivers who can be kind of temperamental, because Malik Nabers has had a reputation for being a guy that was going to get real finicky if he didn't get targets, and they address all that. So here's initially before the combine, somebody from the Giants staff explaining to everybody else, running down all the players, and he goes through Malik Nabers, who the Giants would eventually draft in with the number 6 overall pick.
We got Malik, LSU.
Yeah, Malik, highly passionate, highly competitive kid, loves football. He will train hard, plays with a big-time chip on his shoulder. He's a guy that always won the most targets. You'll hear about it if he's not getting his targets. We need to get around this kid and see if we can work with him, because there is a lot to the personality.
Yeah, you'll hear about it if he doesn't get his targets. So immediately when we start talking about that stuff, I've kind of softened on trying to be Joe Tough, old school Max football guy when it comes to stuff like this, where, yeah, ideally in a perfect world, all of your receivers would be dudes that are A-okay if they get 0 targets in a game, as long as we win. The reality of it is a lot of times your most talented wide receivers are also like they want and need the ball. And Tom Brady this offseason talked about how he always felt it was really important to get guys touches early in the game and to keep them involved. If you think about the way it is in basketball sometimes, where there's certain players, you just want to be sure that they get touches early on, because then they stay more engaged on defense. I think in football sometimes it works out to, hey, if a guy's getting his touches and he's not getting frustrated, then he's going to be still more involved in running his secondary routes, blocking in the run game, all those things. And it's a matter of just being realistic about the situation, not being so idealistic that you're like, well, nope, you could go screw yourself, superstar wide receiver. If you don't get any touches, that's on you. I think that you take the pragmatic approach like Tom Brady, or I think, honestly, Nick Caserio, D'Amico Ryans, Bobby Slowick. I'm guessing they had a conversation about that when they talked about Stephon Diggs. I forgot. Yeah, I was supposed to work this back to the Texans. I think they probably have similar conversations about that, like Stephon Diggs. Okay, he can get temperamental if he doesn't get his touches. All right, look, is it that big of a deal to try to engineer some touches for Stephon Diggs early in the game? No.
How do you handle losing?
So this is Daboll in the player meeting, which you always got to remember, like, this is 15 dudes sitting around watching a player as they grill the player. And Daboll asks him about how he handles adversity, like the kind we just talked about.
How do you handle losing?
Be
straight.
Not at all. I really hate. I hate losing more than I love winning.
Okay, and then how do you handle not being involved early in the game?
How do I handle it?
Yeah,
I handle it pretty tough, especially during the week.
That's what I'm looking for.
Been in the offense, in the week, putting in the work with the one offense, getting a lot of plays, known to be called for me. So if I'm not in those plays and not getting the ball, I'm pretty hard on it.
I don't mind that.
He minds it, but he can live with it, I think, is the whole key. He follows up on that and explains himself a little bit more. But I think if I were his agent and I were coaching him up beforehand, I probably would have fed him a different answer, if we're going through the rehearsals. At the same time, though, I think that you got to respect him for being honest about it. And I think with these meetings, sometimes it's less about using some of this information to make a decision about a guy as much as it is, okay, now I know what type of a guy he is. And, he didn't lie to me about how he gets kind of moody if he doesn't get the ball. He at least understood that we've seen like the sideline discussions or something like that. This is, what? Okay. He wasn't trying to get drafted by the Giants. That's a good point, because afterwards after he got drafted, they asked him about Daniel Jones, and it wasn't the best answer. He's very, very honest, Malik Nabers is. That's a really good point, engineer. You bring up good points, as all of you do. Hello, Mary Buckley. So Brian Daboll goes on to explain, okay, it's okay, but, within reason.
I want guys that want to get the ball, and I want guys that hate fucking losing. But you got to learn how to harness that a little bit.
Right.
I don't mind a competitive fucking juice, man. You need some dogs.
Right.
I want guys that want the ball.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes you lose. I mean, shit, I lose it too as a coach, but got to learn how to harness that good.
Gotcha.
like Joe Shane trying to lighten the situation, and I don't think Daboll was into it. I don't know. That was one of the clips that was on the internet a lot, and people pointed to Joe Shane rubbing Daboll's back there as proof positive that Daboll's the problem and his temper is the issue. Like, Daboll's been open about it. He's trying to. They did. They focused a lot in the Giants offseason on the fact that Daboll didn't seem to be yelling and screaming as much during practice. Again, to go back to the Bill O'Brien connection with Brian Daboll, we saw that a lot in Houston. We saw, it's a new and improved Bill O'Brien this year. He's a kinder, gentler Bill O'Brien. That survives about like one bad game in September before he's back to the same old Brian Daboll or Bill O'Brien. And again, that's not a good thing or a bad thing. I like Daboll's fieriness, and he's also, to be fair to both Bill O'Brien and Brian Daboll, like Brian Daboll did a hell of a job with Josh Allen. I think that's probably, aside from the stuff that he did with Tua and everything, but like in the NFL, he did a hell of a job with Josh Allen. Thought that was really impressive and was part of really re-engineering Josh Allen. So it's not like he doesn't have the temperament to do that. And Bill O'Brien did eventually. I mean, it took a few years, but Deshaun got to the point where in 2020, after Bill O'Brien was gone, Deshaun had figured that system out and was running it in a lot more Tom Brady-like fashion. It's just, it's really hard to get guys into that offense and figure all the things that, basically we saw this with Bill O'Brien. He left New England and he thought like, oh yeah, Brian Hoyer, Ryan Mallett, whatever. They know the system. They'll be able to do all this. They can't do all the stuff that Tom Brady did. My God. Tom Brady's IQ, his football IQ is the equivalent of a wide receiver running a 4.1 40. It's you just can't expect other people to do it just because it looks simple and easy. Okay, so this is the part that's interesting. This is a player. I always used to wonder about this. I always worried about sometimes guys reading too much into interviews. So here's Joe Shane talking to, I want to say his name's Brandon Graham, but I think that's wrong. He's one of the guys who's really coming off better in Hard Knocks, but one of the young personnel guys talking about that interview with Malik Nabers.
The Nabers I thought he was going to come across some more edge the way he plays. Yeah, he was more like reserved. I'm like, damn, that's the same dude out there that's like running people over.
Yeah. I just don't know enough about the kid in general. Like, I don't view any of it as a negative. I just want to get around him.
I'm with you.
But this is the thing, like, name me a dominant player at that position or the corner position or pass rusher that was a choir boy.
Right.
I mean,
yeah. Okay. I mean, that part, I mean, there's plenty of examples. Okay. Andre Johnson, J.J. Watt, if we're going edge rusher, wide receiver, cornerback. I mean, like Ronnie Lott off the field. He had his persona from NFL films and everything as being a madman, but like he was just like the perfectly composed dude in meetings and interviews and off the field and everything. But I get what he's saying. You don't need the guy to have the perfect personality. Obviously, they end up taking him number 6 overall. The other thing though there too with Joe Shane, like he almost, I don't want to read too much into it, but it's like he almost sounded disappointed that he wasn't more energized in the meetings. But man, sometimes the quiet, calm water that's the stuff you got to worry about in a good way.
shit, like he gives us
What is that? Still waters run deep. There you go.
something we don't have. My biggest thing ain't him is whoever the Q is, will they be able to just deal with it? Yeah.
I talked to Daniel about it. Daniel already looked at him.
He loves him. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Daniel loved him. So they're not sure if they love Daniel right now. And that's another thing that gets me excited about the Texans is I'm watching all this stuff with the Giants is like Joe Shane is trying to figure out, and he's very open about it in these episodes. He's trying to figure out if Daniel Jones is the guy that they're paying $40 million a year. They're still trying to figure out if he's the guy. But it is interesting that, he talked to Daniel Jones about it. I listened to a lot of Buffalo stuff as I was trying to, figure out the whole Stephon Diggs scenario from this past year. And, they talked to Josh Allen about some of the receivers. And we know very well that they talked to CJ Stroud in Houston about guys. CJ, oh, dang it. What's his name? The guy that ended up going to the 49ers. CJ was a huge fan of his. So it's cool that Daniel Jones likes him. I'm not sure that Malik Nabers likes Daniel Jones. The other one, the clip that I think a lot of you have probably seen is on social media was Jayden Daniels at the board with Brian Daboll. And a lot of people took it as like, oh, wow, Jayden Daniels looks like an idiot in this. I did not feel that way at all. And I think if you look at it in the context of Brian Daboll, how all this transposed, because there's like a 20-second clip where Jayden Daniels gets a couple things wrong. But just to lay it out, this is Brian Daboll talking to Jayden Daniels, the LSU quarterback drafted by Washington at the Combine.
Favorite pass play. I don't care what personnel, as detailed as you can be.
Got you.
And we are all true freshman quarterbacks in your quarterback room, and you are teaching it to us.
This was a big staple on our offense.
Okay.
Just based off the athletes that we had.
Was that Nabers?
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite route to throw in this one?
Yeah. This one.
That one?
Sure. For sure.
Why do you like that one?
I love when teams try to go man and try to
Hell
match us
yeah.
up.
That's right.
Gun that son of a bitch.
touchdown.
Okay, so that's the setup, and then they go on to talk for a while. I don't want the live stream to be shut down by showing too much copyrighted content, so I can't show you the whole clip. But they go on to talk about how when Daboll was with Brett Favre with the Jets, they would, throw back shoulders in certain situations when they'd see man coverage like that. So they talked it out a bit. And then this is the clip that people were using to act like Jayden Daniels was some kind of moron. Don't worry about, I'm not going to get super technical with the verbiage or anything, but just look at what they're asking him to do, in this situation, in this interview situation with everybody watching. And I'm having a hard time believing that this is somehow indication that he's an idiot.
Hey, Jay, erase that Z, make him the F. Erase the X and make him the Z. Erase the W, make him the X. Erase the T and make him the H. Ready?
Yep.
Gun trolley right, 64 house X in. Give it back to me. Nope, don't look at it.
Oh, you want me
Give it back to me how we call it.
the whole play?
Yeah.
Gun Charlie right, house FN,
Okay, X in.
accent.
That's okay. And then if it's cover one, what do we want you to do? Probably.
Don't touchdown.
All right, I like that answer.
All right. So, all right. Like he had him change the letters for 4 different receivers, and he wanted X to be switched to F or vice versa, whichever it was. And he transposed those two, but he recited it without looking back at it. Exactly what the same play is. In the heat of the moment and the way all of this was edited, who knows? But I didn't think that was a big deal at all. He got the concept, and they just want to know what the concept is. And then I think the other concern people had was like what I thought when I first saw the clip was, well, throw the touchdown isn't the answer that Daboll's looking for. Daboll wants to know, all right, well, okay, how do you throw the touchdown? But they just had a long conversation about exactly how he responds to man coverage or cover one. So I'm not buying that. I think Jayden Daniels took a bunch of huge leaps forward last year at LSU, partly because they had this really advanced virtual reality program that they worked with this group in Germany that had created this virtual reality for soccer players. And the German guys were like, well, we want to figure out how to do this in the NFL. In football. So they talked to a bunch of football teams, I think mostly college, and LSU was super into it because they felt like the technology was a lot better. So last year, headed into the 2024 season, these German guys were working with the LSU staff on figuring out how to change it each week to show that how a defensive back responds to certain routes and certain coverages and everything. And Jayden Daniels, I guess, was just hooked on this virtual reality stuff and was using it all the time. And he changed in the way he processed, the way he played mentally, to a drastic degree. So it's ironic that I think some people are kind of using this whiteboard stuff as evidence that he doesn't get it, when in fact, I think when it comes to on the field and in the classroom, again, this is a very artificial setting in this classroom that they're looking at, I think he'll be just fine. I feel bad that Hard Knocks takes every opportunity they can to make players look like idiots or emotional wrecks or whatever. I don't like that part of it. So I'll stick up for Jayden Daniels a little bit there. CJ Stroud reference coming up. Let me get a couple comments here real quick. Yeah, Ricky Pearsall. I apologize for blanking on his name. How insanely smart CJ Stroud is when it comes to plays and stuff. Yeah. And again, these clips, I don't put a whole lot of weight into just how much those guys showed or didn't show over the course of an entire 15 or 20 minute interview. But I think CJ's level of understanding of what he was getting into coming into the league, first based on what have they done at Ohio State, because they did a lot more. There was a lot more complexity to that offense with CJ Stroud running it than there had been perhaps with other quarterbacks at Ohio State running it. And the Ohio State offense had option routes, and they had to shift on the fly according to coverages a lot. And one of the guys he was thrown to was Marvin Harrison. So there's a reference to CJ Stroud here. He's not mentioned by name, but it's a it's kind of it's a nice little compliment to CJ Stroud as they're trying to trip up Marvin Harrison. This is one of the Giants staff members talking to Marvin Harrison Jr.
Obviously played with one of the best quarterbacks for a few years. How about you got a young guy, he's growing in the position. You beat a guy like this, get a chance for a touchdown, he underthrows it. What do you come back to the huddle saying to him?
I don't say nothing to quarterbacks.
No.
I don't say nothing to quarterbacks.
I mean, it's a shit throw, right?
I mean, I can make the play. I can make the play still.
Yeah.
So
You're going to take the cheese out.
I would never say anything to the quarterback. I always blame it on myself as I want to make the play.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel bad for Kyle McCord. I felt like they could have said that whole thing about how do you respond to a bad pass or something without basically saying like you went from CJ Stroud to Kyle McCord. It like you went from your dream girl to some hag that you picked up on a corner. You didn't have to say all that. You're just like, oh yeah, this is a bad throw. How do you respond to this? And he could have said it. But poor Kyle McCord's just sitting at home eating his popcorn, watching Hard Knocks, and then boom, out of nowhere, hit upside the head. I think that's another part when it comes to the dynamic between, say, Stefon Diggs and CJ Stroud. When receivers get upset about not getting the ball or not getting touches, it's usually a little bit more complicated than just, hey, I'm not getting touches. It's when they're supposed to be getting the touches. It's when, hey, he's the primary route on this play, and everything was unfolding the way it was supposed to be, and the quarterback either just throws it off 8 yards off to the side or just makes the wrong read or gets panicked or flustered or something. I think that fuels it a lot more. And I don't think you have to worry about that with CJ Stroud. So like whether it's Marvin Harrison or Nico Collins or Tank Dell or Stefon Diggs, all that stuff can, whether a receiver is public about it or not, it is all stuff that can start to weigh on people. And if you got a quarterback that you just don't really trust is doing the right thing, I can see where, even though I'd like to think that I would respond differently, but you can see where it starts to seep into a receiver's mind. I think there's going to be a lot fewer opportunities for that just because CJ Stroud is so advanced mentally. Moving off of the CJ Stroud Hard Knocks, the Saquon Barkley situation. And this is interesting because Texan fan Joy says, after the first episode of Hard Knocks, I was wondering if the GM should be a GM. A few minutes into episode 2, I'm amazed he hasn't been fired already. I don't know, man. I softened on him after episode 2. I think part of it is I think he genuinely understands that Saquon Barkley has had a lot of injuries and is going to be 27, 28 years old this year. And that, just playing the numbers, there's a real good chance that he's on the decline already. I mean, there's exceptions to the rule. There's Derrick Henrys, there's guys like that. But I think his big reservation is, man, we gotta trade for Brian Burns. We're gonna sign offensive linemen in free agency. We want to do all these things to improve the overall roster. I just can't be spending the going number on a running back unless it's a number I'm comfortable with. In the first episode, I thought I was like, man, he's really misgauging the running back market here. But that was back like a few weeks before the combine. I think after the combine, he had a better feel for what the market was going to be. I think the scuttlebutt at the combine was probably like, oh wow, there's a lot more interest in running backs. And by that point, they hadn't franchise tagged Saquon Barkley, or I guess maybe whatever the timeline is. By the time that, oh no, this would have been, anyway, regardless. I think he underestimated exactly how much people were willing to pay, but he understands that he didn't understand it. This is Hags on a Corner needs to be a t-shirt. This is Joe Shane asked about Saquon Barkley at the combine.
With Saquon, I'm just wondering if the franchise tag being off the table.
I wouldn't say the franchise tag's off the table. No, I mean, it's I think the new number, if we're going to franchise somebody for the first time at that position, is like 11.9, and his number is not much more than that. So salary cap changes, you're your philosophy and how you're going to attack things. So that's not off the table.
Yeah, so he says his number's not that much more than that. In the first episode, they'd been talking about like 7 million per year or 8 or 9 million per year. So I don't know, something, or I guess that interview at the combine. There's something went on to where they reset what their expectations were for what Saquon Barkley was going to get. This is Shane talking to Saquon's agent.
Here's what I'm worried. We offer him something. He gets a little pissed off because it's not what he wants. And then some other team comes in $1 million over us and he's pissed at us. So he's disrespected. So he goes. So I'm going to let him go to the market. And if you just want to keep your word and say, hey, he said he wants to be a Giant for life, the chance of being in the Ring of Honor. There's a lot of things out there that he's got to take into account. I think he can still play. It's just, you got to get the value right. And you look at the data. The data is like, it is what it is.
Yeah, and the data is that guys, I mean, on average, running backs peak at like age 24 or something absurd like that. This is where I do start to worry about when guys start to lean on the data too much, that there are guys who are exceptions. There's Curtis Martins. There's Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson was still very good and had some of his best seasons after the age of 30. I think Derrick Henry is a guy that, other than the 1 year he was injured, has been very durable. And even though a lot of people that just watch the Texans games of Derrick Henry don't realize that he had a really good year last year because he was he was god awful versus the Texans. The Texans crushed him in 2 games. It was the weirdest thing. It was almost like they were taking out any hatred they ever had for T.Y. Hilton, who had owned the Texans forever, and they took it out on Derrick Henry, who had also owned the Texans forever, and gave him a couple of his worst games of the year. It was they held him to less than 2 yards per carry, I believe, in both those games. But here's Shane basically admitting that he doesn't know what the market is.
But I didn't want to come in at a number because I really don't have a great idea where the market is. That's why I'm going to let the league tell him what it is. And hey, if you want to come back and be a Giant, let's try to find something that makes sense. Like, we're close, then let's have a conversation. Because again, I do think he was our best offensive player.
Yeah, and the other part of it, and again, this is where it makes me feel really good about where the Texans are right now, is that you're not comfortable in the modern NFL really paying a running back unless you feel like, all right, this is the cherry on top of our offense. This is the thing that's going to really help put us over the top, because it's hard for running backs to be the driving force of an offense anymore. If you have if you have a running back that's the driving force of your offense, there's a really good chance that, unless, the Titans almost did it when they had AJ Brown, that you're not going to be able to score points fast enough being that kind of an offense. I mean, we saw this with the Ravens when it was Lamar Jackson's running ability that was so scary. When he won the MVP there, it's that when they were behind or when they had to score quickly and they had to pass the ball, they just couldn't do it, no matter how good Lamar Jackson was. And that's where the Texans are in a position, or all of a sudden got to this position where, all right, look, it's worth paying Joe Mixon the money we're going to pay him. And, even though they didn't even really have to, just because they felt like everything else was already in place. And at the very least, too, there with Joe Mixon, I mean, I don't want to get too far into the X's and O's again. We've talked about this a million times. When you're going to run the offense that the Texans run, and play action is going to be a big part of it, you don't have to be successful running the ball to set up the play action. But if you want it to be a good offense, you better be getting respectable yardage on those run plays. You don't want to run the ball twice to set up play action and it's still 3rd and 10. You want to run the ball twice to get to 3rd and 3. And then they're really dialed up to like, oh crap, man, they're running the ball all over us. And now we also got to defend the pass. It's the Texans obviously weren't there yet. I think the big playability is the first to go in a running back, and Saquon made his mark with explosive plays. Between injuries and age, odds seem low he'll make his contract worthwhile. Yeah, and I would say, I think the other thing too with Saquon, and I'm not hating on him at all, but I think even though he's gotten better at it, he is magnificent. And I think what he provides in the pass game, whether he's as explosive as he used to be or not, is still really, really good. But again, that's a cherry on top type of thing. When it comes to the actual running the ball, I mean, he's still very boomer bust. He's not as bad as he used to be, but he doesn't steadily churn out yardage. And I know people make excuses for him based on the offensive line, and that's understandable. But you got to remember that, like, Derrick Henry had the worst offensive line in football last year. They were worse than the Giants. They were worse than every other fan base that thinks they had the worst run. The Texans offensive line in the run game. The Titans were way worse. And yet Derrick Henry's success rate, like the percentage of times that he got good, substantial, positive yardage, was much higher than Saquon Barkley's. And it's that's when you're trying to get to, like, hey, we just want to be a competitive offense. That's what I think you're looking for. And with that advancing age, I don't think that Joe Schoen thought that that's what all of a sudden Saquon Barkley was going to turn into. The one, this is where it gets uncomfortable. Let me see. Dumb question. Who actually knows what the market for positions are? I know it changes based on different contracts, but who knows if it's above or below market value? GMs, agents. I think Shane was being honest there when he said he didn't know. I think that he probably got a sense for there being more pent-up demand. In the earlier episode, he was talking about how Devin Singletary played for $2.5 million last year. Like, yeah, we can go grab a guy for $2.5 million. I think somewhere along the way, he started to realize it was going to get more competitive than that, but it was also probably after the point when they'd already franchise tagged him and maybe realized he might have made a mistake there, because this is the year. I think the Texans might have given up a draft pick for Saquon Barkley. The Texans weren't far off, according to Aaron Wilson, from the Eagles' final offer. I don't know how much the guaranteed money was, because the Eagles gave him a lot of guaranteed money. But I mean, that alone, if the Giants could have just traded Saquon Barkley to the Texans. And again, I preferred other guys other than Saquon, but I wouldn't have hated Saquon Barkley being here. Then they would have kept him out of the division. You wouldn't have had a super motivated Saquon Barkley going against you twice a year. And not that you should think this way, but that's the kind of thing that gets a GM fired, especially when the owner seems really reluctant to let go of Saquon Barkley in this episode. But my simple answer is I don't think they have a really good feel for what the offers are going to be. But I think you can start to get a sense for, okay, maybe this is the year the pendulum swings back the other way. And because of the guys that are available, and because, defenses have gotten really light, they've focused so much on trying to stop the run that a lot of teams are now starting to think, all right, look, maybe we did undervalue running backs. Maybe we should put a little bit more emphasis on that. But it's a big guessing game. It's like watching your economic forecasts. When the economics people with 13 PhDs try to tell you whether a recession's coming or not, they don't know. They just don't know. This is where it gets uncomfortable. This is Joe Schoen talking to Saquon Barkley.
I think just mulling over this, the right thing to do is let you test the market and see what your value is. I don't want to do the franchise thing or all that stuff again. I don't want to go through that. We've both been through that. If you really want to be a Giant for life and you're interested in staying here and coming back, just see what your market is, and then have Ed come back to us, and we'll see if we can come to an agreement.
All right, I appreciate that.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Can you give me your word on that, or you're not going to give us a chance?
Okay, this is the part. I'm curious about your guys' feedback on this, because I feel like, honestly, when it comes to giving advice on negotiating, I feel like that economics professor that you don't necessarily want an economics professor being the guy that actually runs your company, because he might know a lot about it, but he's never actually done it. And that's how I am with negotiating sometimes. I know what you shouldn't do. I wonder about, like, say, asking, can you give me your word on it? I could see how some people might perceive that as an insult, almost like, what are you trying to box me in? Or you're trying to assume that I'm lying to you or something. I could also see that maybe, like, you do that as a way to just really try to lock somebody into that promise, like put it right out there and make them give you your word. But the way it was presented right there, I don't know if I would have gone it that route and said it in such a way that it almost makes it it feels like there's the most important thing between two negotiating parties, if you're trying to have a win-win negotiation, like whenever you're having a negotiation with somebody that you're going to have an ongoing relationship with, you want to be sure that you're building towards a good deal for both of you. And the whole like, can you give me your word on that, or have you already moved on? It feels a little bit contentious, and I don't know if I would have injected that into it. Used car salesman bullshit, right? Well, and with a used car salesman, that's not necessarily a win-win scenario, right? Now, I mean, with a really good salesman, then they want to sell you more cars in the future and build a blah, 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 blah. We know like a lot of car salesmen are just, they're worried about making their quota that month. And some of like the shadier they are, they'll say anything to sell a car. Yeah, that doesn't feel like a win-win negotiation. That's the kind of GM line that gets you fired. You know, that's you give us your word. What type of question is that? All right, good. You guys are in agreement with me on that one. You know, he did it to the agent too. I didn't include that part, but he said, you know, are you something like that, equivalent to like, are you going to honor what you said and do this or whatever? Like, all right, well, man, if we got any kind of trust in this relationship, don't be questioning me before I give you opportunity to question me on this. So the second part of this was Saquon Barkley's response. And this is where I wanted to ask that question. He asks, can you give me your word on that, or have you made your decision already? Listen to Saquon's tone of voice.
What do you mean? Like circling back?
Yeah.
I mean, I already told you where I want to be. So.
Okay. All right. Well, let's do that. We'll go out and see what the market says. I think it's the right thing to do. I love you, man. I appreciate everything you did for the organization. You know, the 2 years I was here, and I'm not saying we're not going to get something done, but I think it's right if for some reason it doesn't work out, that you know that the organization thinks the world of you and everything you've done. But hopefully, you know, you go out there, you see the market, and you say, you know what, I want to be here, and you give us a shout back.
All right, I appreciate you.
All right, Saquon, I'll talk to you.
Okay, all right, yeah. He was. I mean, I already told you that. Like in that, you never know. That might have been the moment. Like as Saquon, remember the player. The GM's dealing with all these different contract issues, Xavier McKinney, this, that, the other, the combine and everything. The player gets off the phone with that conversation and then just relives it in his brain 500 times before he hits free agency. And that's where I could totally see Saquon Barkley at that point being like, am I going to give you my word on there? Am I going to back out, or what the hell are you talking about? Good old pinky swear negotiating tactic, classic. It comes off very weak. No bother getting their word unless it's their word in writing. There's a part of me, if Shane's playing 5-dimensional chess here, it felt like in the first episode that Shane really wasn't all that keen on re-signing Saquon Barkley. And maybe this is him kind of passive-aggressively trying to not make it happen. I mean, he was arguing like he was actively making arguments for why the Eagles wouldn't want to spend any money on Saquon Barkley. So why would we bother franchise tagging him? And like, obviously he was way wrong on all that. Let's see. It's got, I'm okay with you seeing other people vibes. Yeah. When you're trying to get your girlfriend to break up with you. Yes. Classic 18-year-old Seth Payne move. It took a full 18 months for it to work. I learned my lesson then, because then you know what happens? It was like you push her away, and then all of a sudden, when she's finally pushed away, you're like, oh, how could you treat me like this? Like, sorry if my microphone got screwed up there. Let's see. The past tense too. What you did. If it doesn't work out, you meant the world. Yeah. I would be super embarrassed if I was the GM saying, okay, good. I think we're all in agreement here. All right. I've been taking my online class on interpersonal dynamics, and it's very much, you know, all of the research and studies that come up. I'm in this negotiating part of this interpersonal dynamics class, and so much of it is about keeping things unemotional as much as possible. You know, if the other side gets emotional, give them time to decompress, ask questions to maybe get, further understand where they're coming from, but to just not take it personally. And that includes, not throwing out little passive aggressive barbs that might get a person emotional. And I think Nick's very good at not getting emotional about stuff. I mean, that entire Deshaun Watson ordeal, I don't know if in his private moments he got emotional or not about it, but I think probably in his conversations with David Mulligetta and everybody else, it was, I mean, you can just imagine it with Nick, right? I mean, you could probably see how he handles these things where he's just trying to figure out, what do you guys need? What are your thoughts? Okay, how can we make this all work together? I've read 2 books that Nick recommended to me this offseason. I'll tell you what they are, actually. We should do a book club. I'm going to do this. At some point, I'm going to ask Nick if he wants to come on and just discuss the books that he recommended to me. And Morgan Housel was the one, same as it ever was, is one of the books that I read that he had recommended. That's the only one that I read. I bought the other one, and I can't remember which one it is. But like very much trying to get a broad perspective on what makes human beings operate, what drives value in things. In this last book that I read, like the value of something or the price of something is determined exclusively and totally by how much people want it. And so whether it comes to cryptocurrency or diamonds or actual money itself or what have you, like it all just matters on what people are willing to pay for, and how many people are willing to pay for it, how scarce is it, and like all those concepts of just trying to figure out what people value when you're a GM and you've got a player that you're negotiating with. Some players want more guaranteed money. Some players want to be the highest paid player, even if it doesn't include that much guaranteed money. Some guys just want long-term security. Some guys like Laramie Tunsil want a chance to prove themselves again and get more money. And I think Nick really analyzes all that stuff and goes into these conversations like this, maybe listening more so than talking. And, he's been doing it a lot longer than Joe Shane. I think he was in a position in New England where he had a lot more authority and influence than whatever his title was up there. And when it comes to like just actually negotiating and going above and beyond scouting, I think Nick's been doing it a lot longer. And he was doing it with a mentor in Bill Belichick, who is the ultimate in just being able to separate emotion from it and just make the decision, no matter what your emotions are or what the player's emotions are, you make the decision based on what's best for the team. So I'm with you there. I think in general, I felt better and better about where the Texans are right now. Without throwing any shade at the Giants themselves, they're just at a different phase where they're trying to figure out what the hell they have in their quarterback. And the Texans already know what they have in their quarterback. So let's see. Didn't franchise tag her. Did I say that? I apologize. I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to like try to insult Saquon Barkley or anything. They negotiate from the last 2 seasons for the Giants, and Saquon didn't agree. They offered him the same amount, but Saquon declined, so they franchised. I honestly, I think I know what you're saying there, but I don't know if you're doing voice to text there or not, but it's a little screwy, so I don't know exactly what you're saying. They negotiated for the last 2. I don't know, man. I'm sorry. His question highlights that he's not being straight up. Yeah. And maybe that was by design. Are these generally done by phone? Seems like GMs should be able to persuade players in their favor in person at lunch or something. In the offseason, yeah, a lot of it's done by phone just because the players aren't around. So, that's another part of it is that, man, Saquon's from Pennsylvania. I don't know how much the Giants were going to be able to compete if the dollar values were similar. And I don't think the Giants were in one of the previews of next week. I think they might have shown like how much guaranteed money it was. I don't think the Giants were willing to go that amount of guaranteed money whatsoever. One of the admirable things about the Deshaun trade is that Nick waited until the right time, despite how weird and potentially stressful the whole thing was. Yeah, I've told you guys, I would have bailed on that thing so fast. I would have been a nervous wreck. I would have let emotion get the better to me. I would have been angry and like talking to 3 therapists about it. It would have been a mess and I would have been horrible. That's why I would be a horrible, horrible GM because I'm too much like Bill O'Brien. That's why I recognize a lot of Bill O'Brien's faults and blind spots because those are my same faults and blind spots. Hard Knocks isn't doing the Giants any favor. I don't know, man. I think the one thing that it does point out is like the haziness of everything. That there's just some things you don't know. You go into it and you don't know. To go back to the one comment, yeah, as far as negotiating for the last 2 seasons with the Giants and Saquon didn't agree. Like there's a scene in the last episode where where Shane talks about how stressful that was and it took 10 years off his life. That's exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to keeping emotion out of it. Like, why was it hard? Like, all right, it sucked. It was an uncomfortable situation. These things happen. He claims that he doesn't listen to any sports radio or media talk or anything like that. He wouldn't even know. All right, then why is it affecting you emotionally? Like, this is my problem. And I'll call out my generation, Generation X. We are, as a group and as a rule, I think, with a lot of executives and coaches, they can't handle disgruntled players as well as they used to. There used to be at any given time, like basically 5 players in a meeting room on any team in the NFL, metaphorically like stroking their derringer underneath their coat, ready to shoot the head coach because they were mad about a contract situation or something like that. It just happens. Now, I remember when I was in Jacksonville with Tom Coughlin, we had a player who's an awesome guy, but he was in his contract year and the negotiations weren't going well. And at one point during a game, he flat out yelled in front of everybody, "I hate you. You're a son of a bitch. I never want to play for you again." And a few weeks later, they had a contract. All was cool. It was like Coughlin just took all that stuff. Like, as grumpy as Coughlin was, he knew that some guys were going to be disgruntled at any given time. And to give my generation a break, those guys never had to deal with social media and like how it fans the flames of everything, and that players can just put so many messages about their disgruntlement or create so much drama that can seep into the team. So I'll give us a little bit of a break. But I mean, sometimes, man, that's life in the NFL. People are unhappy. You got a bunch of alpha males that all think they're the guy, and they all want, not all, most of them want more money. Some of them are cooler about it than others. That's just, that's life in the NFL. Toughen up, sister. Let's see. Glad Texans are staying away from the network cameras in the offseason. I know, man. I haven't been, it's been hard just with the amount of attention CJ's gotten with some of the stuff he's done in the offseason. I start to get old school nervous. This would be hard for me to do a few minutes later. Why is it hard? Take the emotions out of it. No, it shouldn't be hard for people who are qualified to do it. I said I'm not qualified to do it, but it's simple for the people who are, like, you're getting paid several $1 million a year to be an NFL GM. It shouldn't be hard for you. Like, that's part of the job description, is things get emotionally taxing or people get disgruntled or whatever. Yeah, there's no inconsistency in my statements there. Damn it, I have masochism, ironically named enough for your comment. I can go down the list. I've got a long list in my mind of jobs that I would be bad at. Fast food restaurant manager, NFL GM, any kind of K through 12 school teacher. I would be absolutely miserable at any of those jobs. And this is why this is how economies work. You find what you're suited to do best. And mine is criticizing all those people who do their jobs better than I actually would. I am going to break it off for today because I went way longer than I already expected. So everybody have a great weekend. I might pop off some film heavy stuff this weekend, and subscribe, whatever. I'm not grubbing for subscribers. Everybody have an awesome weekend.